I want to greet everyone and thank you for coming to our town hall today, our virtual town hall. We have a number of people here in the Zoom call, and then we are streaming through YouTube live stream. And so we want to welcome all of you as well who will be tuning in through the live stream today. We're so glad that we could do this. Dave Kendall and I will be the hosts of this virtual town hall today. Dave, you may know he was the host of Kansas's PBS show Sunflower Journeys for over a quarter of a century. He was the executive producer of KTWU PBS station in Topeka until 2000. There he is waving until 2015, when he retired, and we began our own production company, documentary film company called Prairie Hollow Productions. Dave is a fifth generation Kansan with a farming background. His family background in farming from Morris County. That's where the prairie part of our name came from. I grew up in a small place called Shaftesbury Hollow, Vermont, and it's just as small as it sounds like. And that's where the hollow part of our name came from, Prairie Hollow. Growing up in Vermont, we had town halls every year. I think as far as I know, they're still continuing there. And I remember attending those with my mom and dad when I was a little girl. And I remember recognizing just how important it is, watching people coming together to work together to make their communities better year after year. I found that very impactful. I moved to Kansas in the 1980s and I fell in love with it here. I've lived here ever since. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. And while Dave and I have never been conveners of a town hall, we both certainly feel like we know and love Kansas and Kansans. So you'll please forgive us if some of this is unpolished. We are not affiliated with any particular organization. We're just doing this on our own as concerned Kansans. We've asked our friend, Martha Slater-Farrell, to be a co-host with us for this event and help us with some of the technical aspects, which may come up through the day. Martha is in communications, and she's one of the organizers of an event called Kansas Dialogue. Martha, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to make any brief comments?
Sure.
Just so folks know who you are and can place a face.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, Dave and Laura, for doing this. I think it's great. And hello, everybody. Hello, Jerry. I don't know about you, but I have been hunkered down for weeks in this cold weather. I've barely been sticking my foot outside the door, and I've been watching the TV news and have been fretting up one side and down the other and feeling helpless and feeling like I wanted to talk to people and find out how this is what's happening in your lives. My own family, my dear, dear young relative with young kids got one of those fork in the road letters, and I have been just on the outskirts of seeing their lives have been upended. And I know that they're just one of thousands and thousands of stories. So I'm eager to hear yours today. Thanks.
You know, we, like you, are just regular Americans who are very worried about what's going on. And this is a time where we do what we can, the best that we can. It may not be very polished, but we'll do what we can do. Let me explain just for a minute how this idea got started and what our format is for the day. As I said, like many of you, we were very concerned, Dave and I, about the overreach of the executive branch of our government since the inauguration. Our country is set up to be three co-equal branches of government. The president appears to have no authority to create a new government agency without the oversight and approval of Congress, nor to employ someone who's not been vetted or security cleared to single-handedly cut off funding for programs Congress has already approved funding for. We are also deeply concerned about the many unqualified cabinet positions our senators have approved and the implications that will have for our health, safety, and continued funding of our government and our society at large. With these changes and cuts being made without congressional input and approval, we the people can often feel like we have no voice in our country right now, but that is not true. As we can see here today, that's not true. Dave and I, like thousands of you, and I do believe it's thousands, have called Senator Moran's office daily to express our concerns, and we've requested public statements explaining his votes and the apparent support of the executive branch's actions. We've asked him repeatedly to set up a town hall, please, right away to hear from Kansans, but we've heard nothing back. We also wanted to encourage him to oppose some cabinet nominations that were grossly unqualified, but it's too late for that. Dave and I are deeply concerned about what will happen with people like Kash Patel, Mr. Kennedy, Ms. Gabbard in positions that they absolutely are not qualified to hold. Dave and I have made a formal request through the website, in addition to calling Senator Moran, to ask him to please set up a meeting. Again, we've heard nothing back. We discussed it and we decided to convene this virtual town hall, whether Senator Moran decided to join us or not. And he chose not to, or he did not respond to us, so we don't know. Time is of the essence, which is why we moved to set this up so quickly. We got this idea start to finish and enacted this within a week. It's been just a little over a week, so we're a little frazzled, and again, it's pretty no frills. We've decided to hold this meeting for two primary reasons. One, we'd like to encourage Senator Moran to oppose the current administration's harmful actions, specifically related to Elon Musk and the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. We also wanted to create a shared public platform for our fellow Kansans to share their concerns and the very real harms that they've experienced as a result of these cuts and policy changes. We think it helps if we all realize that we're not alone. We are in this together.
So glad to have everybody joining us. I see there's over 300 people joining the live stream on YouTube already, in addition to this 34 people here that are going to be speaking. So it's a great turnout. It's really gratifying to me to see so many people coming in. I know myself, I'd rather be outside on a day like this doing something, even though it's cold. I would like to be out there, but sometimes there's other things that have to take priority. And this is one of those times where we need to get focused on a challenge at hand and see if we can do something to improve the situation. So anyhow, one thing I wanted to point out, emphasize, as Laura pointed out, I used to be the host of Sunflower Journeys for 27 years on public television in Kansas. And I was also the executive producer at KTWU in Topeka, where I produced public and community affairs programs. But that's been a number of years ago since I left that position, almost 10. And I'm no longer affiliated with public television. So this is just Laura and I doing this. This is not connected to public television or any other organization. I do still watch a lot of public television, and specifically programs like Frontline and the News Hour on PBS. And it's unfortunate to hear that public broadcasting is one of those things on the chopping block these days, as it has been in the past. But things are a little different now. But one of the things that, if you were watching, if those of you who tune in to watch the News Hour, you may have seen a Kansan on there last week, I think it was, who was addressing this situation, this very topic. And so we're going to start out with him tonight. And Nick, if you're ready to go, I'm turning it over to you. So unmute yourself and jump in.
Thank you, Dave, and Laura and Martha and everyone. It's good to see so many familiar faces and some new faces as well. I want to thank everybody that's joining us on YouTube. I'll start off by thanking Senator Moran for his efforts in freeing up the grain that was held up in ports through USAID and getting that moved through the World Food Program to those hungry people all across the world. So I want to thank you for that. Everyone, my name is Nick Lewandowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Farmers Union. We're a family farm organization that's been working since 1907 to protect and enhance the economic interests and quality of life for family farmers, ranchers, and their communities. The current federal funding freeze is disrupting critical programs that farmers and ranchers and their communities rely on. Programs designed to strengthen local food systems, support conservation and soil health efforts, and enhance farmers' operations. It's natural for a new administration to examine existing programs. However, the government needs to keep its existing commitments. We've heard many examples from farmers who've invested tens of thousands of dollars into existing projects with the understanding that federal programs would reimburse or support their efforts. Now funding is uncertain and farmers don't have the capital to incorporate these unexpected expenses into their operations. Farmers aren't the only ones affected. The freeze is leaving state and local agencies as well as partner organizations struggling to interpret and implement federal programs. When farmers and rural businesses face instability, Main Street businesses, from equipment dealers to grocery stores, also feel the impact. When the food system is disrupted, everyone pays the price. Delays in farm programs can lead to reduced production, supply chain disruptions, and ultimately higher food costs for consumers. These programs help farmers manage risk and maintain stable operations, ensuring that grocery store shelves stay stocked and food remains affordable for families. Without clear guidance, these organizations can't provide farmers with the information they need to make critical business decisions for the year ahead.
Hello, my
Thank
name is Susan Peach. I'm from Merriam, Kansas, and I'm here today not just as a fellow Kansan, but as a cancer fighter, a mother, a community member, and a lifelong advocate as a clinical social worker. I'm 60 years old, and I've worked and paid into Social Security disability insurance my entire life. I share my story in the hopes that it resonates with some folks and ignites a sense of urgency within our community. I was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and while I fight bravely, my current reality is still challenging. My husband has a master's degree and works as a church worker, earning a modest income, but a decent medical benefits. Together, we're trying to support our family on his salary and my Social Security disability insurance. We've adopted 5 children and supported 2 others as our very own who aged out of the foster care system. We are a forever family, and we're doing this without any state assistance for 4 of our 7 children that we are raising who've joined our family in non-traditional ways. In addition to these guys, we've got 3 biological children. My husband and I have worked hard to provide for our big family. However, with the rising cost of living, and now with my more limited income, we're finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet, though we can be pretty scrappy and creative. What we had never anticipated was a direct and imminent threat to my SSDI benefits as I continue to fight this beast of a cancer. This is not just a concern for me, it's actually a matter of survival for my entire family. I don't understand how Elon Musk and his young cronies are being allowed to tap into the Treasury Department, the Social Security Administration, the IRS, threaten Medicaid. These unlawful threats to our Social Security Administration and our Department of Education both directly threaten my family's stability and well-being. And I'm here today to implore Senator Moran to stand up for families like ours. We need you to be brave enough to defend us, to uphold the laws that protect our community members, and to ensure that those who have given back to society can continue to do so without fear of the loss of essential resources and support.
Yes, my name is Ann Spangler, and I am a retired federal worker from the Kansas City Regional Office with the Department of Health and Human Services. This department is responsible for the Administration for Children and Families, which funds Head Start. And I am particularly dismayed at the characterization of federal workers as a source of waste and fraud, and referring to the federal workforce as part of the swamp that needs to be drained. I would like to provide some clarification. During my time of employment, our sole focus was to ensure federal funds were being spent to support families with young children and to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. When Head Start programs lost sight of that vision, systems and processes were in place, which would result in being defunded. Federal workers were the ones holding Head Start programs accountable. I'm concerned that the misguided efforts for government efficiency ignore the benefits and proven outcomes from government programs such as Head Start. What are you doing, Senator Moran, to stop the overreach and firing of federal workers who work for all Americans and ensure the government of the people, by the people, and for the people will not perish from the earth? Thank you for your time.
I am a U.S. Navy veteran of the Korean War era. I am not sure at this point whether you are prepared to fight for the VA when Trump and Musk start going after the funding for the VA as they fire competent nurses, doctors, and medical staff. Please tell me, if you are not too frightened of this president, why you and so many other Congress people will not stand up against the illegal actions of this president and his minions. They are demolishing the standards which have made this United States of America a nation to be proud of. As a naval officer serving on 2 different destroyers in the early 1950s, I am ashamed that congressional members are allowing this destruction to our country. And I've signed it as George L. Downing, retired commander in the United States Naval Reserve.
I am retired from 39 years in a public utility in Kansas. I started working when I was 14, not at the public utility, but I've been paying into Social Security since then. And 3 of my 4 brothers are Vietnam veterans. Senator, I would like to know how you feel personally about the fact that Elon Musk has direct access to Social Security data, the veterans data, our tax data, and who knows what else, other vital information of Kansas citizens. And I want to know what you are going to do about the illegal hacking of our federal government data by Elon Musk. According to Newsweek, New York Times, and Forbes and others, Elon Musk receives $8 million a day in government contracts for his businesses, which places him squarely into a conflict of interest managing any of our government's data or money. He himself is a billionaire. He was not elected by the American people. He has not been vetted through established government protocol, as far as we know. He is making drastic decisions in secrecy, with no congressional oversight. As citizens, we have no recourse against this entirely illegal evasion of our privacy, possible tampering with our Social Security system and other systems. You are our representative, Senator Moran, yet you stand by allowing this outsider and his minions to hack into our data. You are allowing this in full view of every voter in Kansas and the rest of the country and the world. Are you going to stop him? How are you going to protect our information and our Social Security and all other sensitive information that, in fact, belongs to the American people, not Donald Trump, not Elon Musk, and actually not you either, Senator. You are our representative. You should be held accountable to us, the citizens of Kansas, the citizens of your state. What are you doing about any of this? Or are you in favor of it?
My name's Diane Juneau. I am a Kansan by birth and have been a registered Republican for over 40 years. But I am very concerned about the current state of our government and the apparent willingness of Congress to just hand over absolute control to both Trump and Musk. Do I believe that some areas need adjustments and improvements? Absolutely. But Musk and Trump are clearly not taking time to fully evaluate those entities before cutting them off at the knees. This should be concerning to all Americans. Please, Senator Moran, do what we elected you to do. Support Kansans and maintain your legislative control as a United States Senator before you end up losing that power. I will not vote for you again if you neglect those responsibilities and continue to give blanket support to one individual at the expense of your own Kansas constituents. Thank you.
I am Jill Knutson. I am from Wamego, and I am a scientist, specifically a biologist and an educator. United States citizens and our representatives should all be concerned about the war on science. For example, the lack of adequate science education and comprehension is at the heart of the pushback against vaccinations. We're already seeing major measles outbreaks in West Texas amongst a group of unvaccinated people. We're seeing tuberculosis outbreak in Kansas City, something that was almost unheard of in the last 100 years. Personnel cuts in the National Institutes of Health, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Science Foundation all send a strong negative message that scientific research is just not of value to this administration. These organizations have already been running at minimal staffing and funding, and these cuts will send the United States backwards in our knowledge and skills for scientific research.
My name is Claudia Volbrock, and I am a retired art teacher from Medicine Lodge, Kansas, way down by the southern border. Today, I'm inquiring whether you, Senator Moran, possess the fortitude and courage necessary to express displeasure in Congress towards Trump and Musk actions, which are plunging the U.S. into chaos while disregarding the Constitution and democratic process. The U.S. is edging closer and closer to our autocratic nationalistic nation due to Trump's criticism, unfounded allegations, and retaliating actions against his enemies and countries that disagree with his policy. Senator Moran, will you take measures to ensure Elon Musk is held accountable for his compromising federal government cybersecurity and America's sensitive personal and financial information, bypassing congressional oversight and legal accountability? Kansas needs to know these questions and plus many more. So thank you for letting me talk today.
So, Senator, I want to get to the main reason that to my written comments. In Salina, by the way, there are probably 200 people right now on Ohio Street protesting this administration. They couldn't be here. But as manifestation of the pain of irresponsible, chaotic actions on the part of this administration, we know personally here a friend of ours who happens to be Black and a woman and a veteran, no less. And I know you have an interest in Veterans Affairs as well. She has been assigned to our state central office of the National Resources Conservation Service for several years. She was hired through a civilian hiring firm for a time, but then within the last year, through hard-earned experience and dedication, was fully appointed to federal employment status. However, that status was probationary, even though she actually had over 3 years of service and was well established. She has been crushed by the firing. Her life is in a shambles, and the state's farming community has been deprived of her services. That story, her story, is multiplied by thousands across the country, 30,000 at the last that I saw just today. 30,000 people like that. Let that sink in. This chaos has been inflicted through an entity outside the formal congressional process of created agencies, as has been ably pointed out in these presentations. All of us would like to know your ideas about how you will push back actively against that juggernaut.
My name is Manya Schmidt, and I'm from Topeka, Kansas. And I have been a healthcare provider in Kansas since 1978. And I can honestly say I've never been so concerned about the citizens of Kansas as I am now. I've contacted Senator Moran, your office, on numerous occasions, only ever getting voicemail, asking you to consider a non-confirmation vote on many of Trump's nominees, specifically RFK Jr., and to take a serious look at legislation that would adversely affect the healthcare of Kansans. Cuts to Medicare and inadvertently Medicaid and inadvertently to Medicare will affect the most vulnerable of Kansans, the elderly, children in foster care, adults and children with disabilities, not to mention the nursing home industry, rural hospitals, and clinics who depend on Medicare and Medicaid for reimbursement. Those are the Kansans you speak of with such familiarity and caring, but are you willing to follow party lines and vote yes on the budget proposal that will result in cuts to these programs? It's unconscionable and does not speak well to your promises to your constituents. I know for a fact that public opinion is important to you in looking forward to the next election cycle. You may have noticed that only after 1 month in office, the president's approval rating is plummeting, and the voting public are questioning with fervor the intentions of his leadership. Is he the leader you want to align with, Or are you willing to speak up and speak out to benefit the constituents in your home of Kansas? I'm telling you, Senator Moran, this is the expectation of the Midwesterners you profess to love.
I'm Carol Williamson from Lawrence, Kansas. I'm a retired STEM educator and a lifelong Kansan. Your staff might recognize me from your voicemail. Senator Moran, you and the Republicans in Congress have assisted President Trump in creating a constitutional crisis because you have not used legislative checks on a lawless president. Instead of insisting that congressionally approved funds be spent, you're allowing the president to ignore the law and dismantle programs. You need to stand up to the president. Kansans have been calling you, but you are ignoring us. You've not spoken out about the pardoning of January 6 felons who now live among us. You've not spoken out about the egregious termination of government employees, including right here in Lawrence, a third of Haskell University employees. You voted to confirm a truly awful and dangerous cabinet of Trump loyalists. You're a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, yet you still confirmed Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, even though she defends Trump's relationship with Putin and other autocrats. You've not spoken out about Trump's lies about Ukraine and his undermining of Ukraine's right to defend their country, nor have you spoken out against Trump's undermining of our NATO alliance. You need to do your job as senator and enforce legislative checks over an autocratic president who's unlawfully tearing apart our country for his own power and financial gain and for retribution against his enemies. Just because Trump said he would cause this chaos and people still elected him doesn't mean you aren't responsible to stop Trump's lawless and unconstitutional acts. You have a constitutional duty as a member of Congress to control an unlawful president, especially since you confirmed Supreme Court justices and lower court judges who will not. You need to be accountable to Kansans and to your oath of office. You need to help us save our country. Will you speak up, Senator Moran?
My name is Annette Box. I am an English as a second language teacher in Johnson County, Kansas. Senator Moran, I understand that you and your colleagues pulled an all-nighter this week to pass a $340 billion resolution to help fund the Trump mass deportation and border security agenda. I saw comments from Roger Marshall, but not from you. What are your views on Trump's mass deportation agenda? Do you believe that the majority of the people who enter our country illegally came here to commit crimes and steal from the government programs, as Trump has stated again and again at his rallies? Or can you acknowledge that people who left their homes and made often dangerous treks to get here did so out of desperation and the hope of having some chance of securing a better life for themselves and their families? We, the people of Kansas, know that immigration reform is necessary and way overdue, but the majority of us are not on board with cruel and inhumane treatment of people who simply want a chance of a better life for their families. Can we count on you to push back on cruel and inhumane treatment of undocumented Americans and work across the aisle on immigration reform, which includes pathways to citizenship? I hope so. Thank you.
We had a couple of people who couldn't be here today and did submit their comments. And as I mentioned earlier, either Dave, myself, or Martha would be reading those. This is from Jean Younger. She did want me to use her whole name. Jerry, I am your constituent who has lived and worked in Kansas most of my life, including Hayes, Wichita, Overland Park, and Lawrence. The recent actions taken by Trump, Musk, and Doge, and the Republican senators, including you, acquiescing to these actions are causing significant and detrimental harm to all Kansas residents. Please stand up and work across the aisle with your Democratic counterparts to stop the bleeding and dismantle the harm that has already occurred. Your inaction is costing constituents millions of dollars in both market share, grain markets lost through USAID, contracts lost through the USDA programs, and lost wages, firing of federal employees and jobs reliant on federal contracts. The loss of these markets and incomes will only snowball down to others in communities, causing more jobs lost, more closed businesses, ruined economies, and ultimately, if left unchecked by Congress, the destruction of our democracy. Further, Trump's enactment of Project 2025 is turning the United States into a modern-day Nazi Germany. How can you in good faith support this? But if you work with the Dems across the aisle, you can stop this. And you are not alone. As our senator, you are a member of a co-equal branch of government. Please, we hired you, not Trump and Musk, to legislate and fund programs. Stop advocating your responsibility to them and work on behalf of the constituents that hired you. Be brave, be strong, and join the Dems in Congress to fight back to save our country.
Joanne Gartner here. I am in Salina, the crossroads of America, and I just have a few thoughts for Senator Moran. Growing up in Hayes, my mom and dad, Sally and Verlene, enjoyed square dancing with your parents. My dad always spoke highly of you, Jerry. He felt that you were someone he could talk to and knew that you would hear him out. Those conversations weren't always pretty, Dad would say, but Jerry always listened. My dad has been gone for 10 years now. He was able to enjoy a long retirement and appreciated your attendance at his 70th birthday party. But now I wonder what my dad and your dad are up there talking about. There are ways to make changes and to streamline our federal government, but Elon Musk and his chainsaw are not that process. Please don't end Medicaid and Medicare. Please keep SNAP benefits, WIC, Head Start, school lunches. There are so many Americans, so many Kansans desperately in need of these social safety nets. Congress has had decades to try to revamp these programs and make new laws so that people don't take advantage of them. But you failed. Unless the Republican Party begins to fight for the people you're elected to represent, this country is going to be plunged into a nightmare that no one would have fathomed. Please do the right thing. My dad expected this. I'm sure your dad expected this. And I sit here today telling you that I expect this.
Allowing someone such as Elon Musk, who's unvetted, unelected, and not confirmed by elected officials, unlimited access to sensitive personal and national information is a serious breach of the trust placed in those elected officials. Additionally, there's no oversight mechanism in place and no requirement to substantiate the wild claims that are being made. What actions will you, as a senator, take to remedy this situation and require proof of claims made? Results of these actions over the past month have resulted in terminating many valuable public servants, providing service to farmers, health professionals, and agencies our citizens depend on to interact with the government. Elected officials have a responsibility to control this type of indiscriminate action. Please stand up and be counted. And I will thank you in advance for when you do stand up for us. Thank you, Senator Moran.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Senator Moran. My name is Carolyn Welch. I'm a retired music teacher and choir director, and I used to cross paths with Raba from time to time. My husband and I live in rural Douglas County. Our daughter is a physician at KU Med, and our family is particularly grateful for your support of medical research and your role in helping to create the Cancer Center at KU Med. None of us voted for Elon Musk. His presence in the Oval Office and his unchecked influence has raised serious concerns about the ability of billionaires to buy power, shape public discourse, and manipulate media platforms for their own interests. The optics of Elon and Trump gleefully shredding the federal workforce are grotesque. The process has been cruel and chaotic. Indiscriminately purging the workforce of experienced employees with vast institutional knowledge and expertise is destabilizing to the very functioning of the federal government. Defending the citizenry from a rogue president is surely not what our congressional leaders signed up for. But if it comes to that, I pray that you will fight hard for us and the preservation of our democracy. Governing is honorable and important, and you have so much to be proud of from your many years of public service. If it falls to Congress to safeguard and restore the integrity of our democracy, please know that you have our full support. I trust that you will stand firm in upholding democratic values and holding them who undermine them accountable.
I'm a U.S.-born citizen, 75 years of age, retired, a lifelong taxpayer, a volunteer at the University of Kansas Cancer Center. I served in the National Guard, and never in my life have I seen such a departure from the United States I have known. Caring for others and caring for our own basic Christian values seem to be going by the wayside. We can begin with the halting of aid for those that are hungry. Is much of this grain grown in the state of Kansas, a state you promised to represent? I would think yes. Now we have a showman, Musk, marching about a stage in the current CPAC with a chainsaw touting slashing government waste. This isn't a game show. This is about the well-being of my children, your children, and the future of the United States. I find it obvious that our government is being gutted as a matter of extremist ideology at the hands of few and no voice from our representatives. This is far from incremental change and a dangerous path to take for our well-being. I honestly doubt those that cast their vote for the current administration after repeated warnings had any idea what would play out. Your voice is needed now more than ever. Your legacy will be written into this chapter of American history. It's up to you to determine how that will read. Our national values are under assault. Our Constitution is under assault. You were sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Ernie Block.
Hello, everybody, and Senator Moran. My name is Anda Arms. I currently serve as a social work therapist and work with foster children here in the state of Kansas. I also served for 20 years as a director and an educator at 4 different U.S. military installations where I taught active duty soldiers, veterans, DoD civilians, with 13 of those years out at Fort Riley, Kansas. Trump has endorsed 880 billion cuts to Medicaid. That directly impacts 3,966 foster children and their families. That include individual and family therapy, substance use services, psychiatric medications, and psychiatric residential facilities. These health services help protect and reduce threats to suicide, substance use, homelessness, truancy, and protective medications such as ADHD medications, anti-anxiety, antidepressants, sleep medications for night terrors, and antipsychotics for children with severe behavioral and intellectual disabilities. Their basic human rights, I assume, are not dissimilar to the wishes you have for your children and your grandchildren to be well, happy, safe, and at peace. The buck can stop here. We support you to stand for justice, for the well-being of our Kansas children, our veterans, and our future. Thank you for hearing our concerns, Senator Moran, our public servant.
Good afternoon. This is Philip Nell speaking from Manhattan, Kansas, which has been my home for 25 years now. Thanks to Dave and Laura for organizing this, and thanks, of course, to the photograph of Senator Moran taped to an empty chair for joining our town hall today. We appreciate your time. So we're entering the 4th week of Elon Musk's administrative coup. And my main question today is, when will you, Senator Moran, be standing up for our democracy? When will you be upholding your oath of office? Because, as has been pointed out here today by a number of speakers, with no understanding of how government works, Musk and his team are destroying systems that keep us safe, firing air traffic controllers, firing people trying to contain bird flu, firing National Nuclear Security Agency people who secure nuclear weapons. Now that USAID has been shut down, how many people have died? And how many will die? Not just abroad, but here. USAID monitors and contains disease outbreaks around the world, which prevents those diseases from reaching us here in Kansas. Or it used to. Musk's recklessness is profoundly dangerous. Destruction is not efficiency. I would hope that you'd know the difference between destruction and efficiency, and for that matter, between legal and illegal. Because Elon Musk's destruction of our government is also illegal. Elon Musk does not have the power of the purse. Congress, which includes the Senate, where you work, Congress has the power of the purse. Or it used to. So why has the legislative branch of government, your branch of government, why has it ceded all its power to the executive branch? Indeed, to an unelected South African billionaire who is now functioning effectively as our executive branch. Where's your patriotism, Senator Moran? For that matter, where's your spine? In April, I will need to fly for business. If any of those planes crash, I hope that you, Senator Moran, can live with having another death, my death, on your conscience. Because you and all who stand by while Musk destroys our government will be responsible. Fascism is here, Senator, and you are fiddling while America burns. So stop fiddling. Stop Musk's coup. Stand up for democracy. Thank you again for your time today.
As a constituent, I have had contact with your office in the past through Friends Committee on National Legislation, and I have observed that you have shown political courage in some instances. As your constituent, I wonder why your office has not reacted to the cutting of federal government programs that were enacted by a bipartisan Congress. What has happened to constitutionally mandated checks and balances? If the executive branch takes it upon itself to discard legislation which it dislikes without due process. Focusing on one specific program, USAID, created by Congress, has served as a lifeline to countries all over the world in matters of health, education, food aid, economic development, and peace building. The sudden withdrawal of these funds and dismissal of its workers promises to have devastating and far-reaching effects. This aid works two ways. It provides life-giving material, personnel, and education, and it solidifies the standing of the United States, existing as it does in relationship with the rest of the world. The international goodwill promoted by this program is immeasurable. Calling it a waste of money is missing the point, which is the impact of a powerful country creating a friend and ally while giving life-saving assistance. And if we value our international reputation and care about the strength of a stable and just world order, then we must support the reinstatement of USAID. At this moment, the role that Congress plays will determine whether we as a country choose to follow the Constitution, establishing three equally powerful branches of government, or abandon it in favor of a dominant executive branch.
Senator Moran, where are you? We miss you. It's rare to reach a live person at your office. I have left literally hundreds of messages over the last 14 years or so. Never one callback. I've received exactly 3 generic written responses from you. You voted for Kash Patel. Besides being loyal to Trump, why did you do that? What good does Patel do for Kansas? What good does Patel do for the U.S.? Who do you serve? You voted for Tulsi Gabbard. Besides being loyal to Trump, why did you do that? How does that serve Kansas? How does that vote help the U.S.? Who do you serve? Where is your oversight? Why are you not speaking up? DOGE is not about government efficiency, but about government elimination. Your job is to put checks and balances on the executive. You are failing. I read Project 2025. I'm not sure you did. This is all spelled out there. Early this morning, the Senate was voting until 5 a.m. The Democrats offered at least 7 amendments that would have helped Kansans. You voted against all of them. There were amendments to stop the tax cuts for the uber wealthy, at least 4 versions with increasing the cap to ridiculous amounts of income level for the cutoff. You voted against all of them. For the last time I ask you, who do you serve?
I am a Kansan. I'm from Northeast Kansas, and I'm a mother of 2. And one of my 2 has a rare genetic syndrome. And she will need Medicaid funded long-term services and supports for the rest of her life. I want to acknowledge and thank you for standing up for the rights of people with disabilities in the past. And I ask you to do the same now. I am extremely worried about deep cuts to Medicaid already proposed in the House, which could become law this spring if the Senate gets on board with those deep cuts. I've looked closely at the numbers, and there is no way to get to the proposed $850 billion in cuts over the next 10 years without deep cuts to the services and healthcare for people with disabilities like my daughter and many, many others. This funding is already stretched really thin in our state, with an 8 to 10 year wait list for the Medicaid waiver that supports people with intellectual and developmental disability like my daughter. To be clear, this cut is proposed not to reduce the debt or the deficit, but to fund tax cuts that overwhelmingly support the wealthiest Americans and do almost nothing for families like me, for working class and middle class families. In particular, we could see cuts to home and community-based services. And those are currently optional by the states under law, and these services are foundational to keeping disabled people like my daughter in home environments with friends and loved ones. As opposed to being institutionalized, which was the old model, as many of you probably know. So when you couple these proposed cuts with some of the language coming out of the administration, and I'm going to go ahead and put Elon Musk as a member of the administration, no matter how many times they try to say that he's whatever, not an employee, not in charge of DOGE or whatever they claim to say. So when you couple these proposed cuts with some of the language coming out of the administration, like Elon Musk's posting of a meme calling people who rely on federal programs like my daughter parasites. When you look at that, it seems pretty clear that we're not really talking about fraud and waste. This is more about an attempt to turn back the clock toward a crueler era where some of our neediest, most vulnerable citizens were seen as unworthy and beneath any real consideration. In fact, almost not even human. So I ask you, Senator, please don't vote for any bill that pulls funding from Medicaid. Please stand up for our most vulnerable citizens, like my daughter and many, many others in your state, many of whom are not able to advocate for themselves. So they desperately need you to speak for them in Congress. Thank you for listening.
Next, we're moving on to comments by Miguel Flores, who could not be here today. So Dave is going to read his comments for him.
My name is Miguel. I am the son of a Filipino immigrant on my mother's side and the grandson of a Navy officer on my father's side. I have direct family members who have served in almost every branch of the U.S. military and come from a family that has been proud to serve in this nation's hospitals, local, and federal government. 7 years ago, I moved to Kansas. Since coming here, I've worked as a domestic violence awareness advocate, library worker, and trauma educator. Through all my time in Johnson County's schools, juvenile delinquent centers, unhoused shelters, and public libraries, I've had the privilege of seeing this country from the perspective of its most underprivileged members, as well as its most affluent. Over the past month alone, I've been hard at work helping legal immigrants print copies of their identification papers, helping unhoused persons seek resources for shelter during below freezing weather, and contacting local organizations to continue getting resources to those in need. The current administration is making reckless decisions that will, and already have, actively harm people's lives. They have shown that they do not care about the interests of the people which they serve, and are willing to participate in cruel policymaking that will only increase the financial burden on people's lives. At best, they are participating in unchecked power grabs that could and should be checked by the legislative and judiciary branches of the government. Senator Moran, it is your responsibility as a civil servant to represent the people who have put you in your position, to mitigate harm and to pursue justice. Put pressure on the executive branch to abide by the law and due process. What is the history of our nation, if not the defiance of kings? We ask you to represent the people, not oligarchs, to remember that your oath is not to a party, but to the betterment of this country and the ideals for which we claim to stand, the rights to life and liberty for all. And again, those were the words of Miguel Flores.
We'd like to move on next to Helen, if Helen is here. I don't see Helen in the list, but maybe. Oh, you are here. Good. I figured you may not have a name that I can discern here. So Helen, if you want to turn your camera on, and I will mute so you can go.
What I originally came to say was that in an email response to my concerns over Elon Musk being appointed to a government oversight committee, Senator Moran says, quote, "Thank you for taking the time to reach out and express your concerns with the Department of Government Efficiency. According to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, in the most recent fiscal year, the government issued $250 billion of improper payments. This, along with over $36 trillion of national debt and an annual deficit of $2 trillion, is unsustainable. For the sake of our grandchildren, we need to address the waste, fraud, abuse, and incompetence within our federal government. One of President Trump's campaign promises was to address all of this." End of quote. Interesting you mentioned incompetence within our federal government, but while President Trump's campaign promise might have been to address these things, and most people would agree they need to be addressed, it did not include allowing an unelected citizen to cancel any program he didn't personally benefit from, dismantle the agencies that would hold Elon Musk accountable for wrongdoing, increase the national debt by giving tax cuts to the wealthy, and stealing from American citizens by cutting Social Security and Medicare, which we have paid into. Your grandchildren, I'm afraid, Senator Moran, will suffer along with the rest of us. And I would like to conclude by echoing what Carol Williamson said earlier, and that is, please, Senator Moran, do your job. Thank you.
Senator Moran, I am a retired USD 259 teacher who taught students about history around the world and of the United States. I do not claim to be a constitutional scholar, but taught my students how the founding fathers gained their ideas of separation of powers, checks and balances, 3 branches of government, separation of church and state, and the inalienable rights of man from the Enlightenment thinkers. I have voted for you every time you have run for office, not because I agree with most of your viewpoints, but because you return to the state on a very regular basis to actually talk in person with your constituents. Today doesn't count. And not just to campaign donors. You genuinely care about our veterans who have stood and fought for our country, the Constitution, and our democratic republic. You fight for farmers who are the backbone of our country. With that said, I am extremely concerned with the unconstitutional and illegal acts, orders, and movements of Donald Trump, his Senate-approved secretaries, but mostly the illegal actions of Elon Musk. The number of federal employees whose jobs were lost due to random cuts are dumbfounding. There are over 640,000 veterans working in the federal government. Musk has no elected or government authority to enact such cuts beyond Trump's orders. Congress, not the executive branch, has the power of the purse, but is doing nothing to stop this nonsense. All Americans are aware cuts need to be made, but we expected our elected officials to accomplish this through their congressional powers. However, as a lifelong learner of history, what terrifies me the most is the similarities to Nazi Germany. Even the European countries and our allies no longer trust us. The very idea the United States has the right to take over sovereign countries such as Canada is obscene. We, sir, are not Russia, nor do we want an authoritarian government built just as Vladimir Putin would like. There's so many things which concern me, but until we regain control of the regime Trump is implementing, none of the other items will see change. Senator, as an elected official who has worked with both Democrats and Republicans in the past to find a common ground, you cannot be unaware of the consequences if this coup is not stopped. Therefore, my question for you is, how are you and like-minded Republicans going to step up and stop the carnage before it's too late?
That's a good question. When are they going to step up and do their job as a co-equal branch of government, as we call it? Heather Cox Richardson, a lot of you probably are familiar with her, has mentioned Senate Republicans could stop this anytime they wanted. And as Adam Kinzinger pointed out, they've basically ceded their powers. So that's where we are. So next, we're moving on to Mary Nolan, who I believe is not able to read her own piece. So I think Martha is going to do that for her. Right, Martha?
That's right, Dave. Mary Nolan is from Hutchinson. I am deeply concerned about the way Elon Musk has been allowed access to all the information he has been allowed to. It's extremely unsettling that an unelected individual suddenly has the power to see classified and top secret information and can fire and lay off so many employees without anything going through any sort of procedural meetings. My son is an Afghanistan veteran. He has injuries for which he receives benefits. Let me tell you that no amount of money can pay for the price of life-altering injury and loss of life. But to even consider cutting VA benefits or services or reducing the staff that serves these veterans is one of the most unpatriotic and harmful things our government can do. Please do not be a part of this. The Veteran Suicide Hotline literally has saved lives of those who have lived through worse than most of us can imagine. Please do not be a part of discontinuing that service. I have a special needs sister-in-law who depends on Medicaid to help pay her long-term care. Please do not take that away from her. She needs a safe, equipped place to be cared for, and Medicaid will pay for that. We are the people of Kansas. You are supposed to represent what is in our best interest. Please do that. Please do that. Mary Nolan from Hutchinson.
My name is Stephen. I'm a lifelong Kansan and constituent in Valley Center. And I just want to say from the outset that seeing this many Kansans come together for this meeting is really encouraging for me personally. That said, Senator Moran, many of us are watching what's happening in Washington, D.C. with fear, anger, and frankly, embarrassment. Fear that firing air traffic controllers mere weeks after a plane crash into the Potomac River could lead to even more devastating consequences. Anger that the president's first instinct after that crash was to immediately place the blame on women, minorities, despite no evidence to support it. Embarrassment for Republican leaders who are literally, figuratively twisting themselves into pretzels to justify the president's claim that Ukraine started the war against Russia, while at the same time calling President Zelensky a dictator. Moniker, mind you, that Trump refuses himself to use to describe Vladimir Putin. I have a litany of other concerns. Federal workers being fired from their jobs, Elon Musk illegally raiding and shuttering entire departments, a lot of other concerns that other before me had mentioned. My biggest fear by far, though, is the lack of respect this administration has had for the Constitution of the United States. This president and his administration think they're above the law. I think we all see it. They're literally saying the quiet parts out loud. You know, the president's not even insinuating at this point. He's blasting over social media that if he thinks something is in the best interest of the country, if he thinks it is, it's not illegal. Meanwhile, you have his vice president declaring that judges aren't allowed to control the executive branch's power. All disturbing things to me, and hopefully a lot of others. So while I rarely agree with her policies, Senator Moran, I have always considered you to be one of the more reasonable Republican senators in Kansas. And while you recently spoke out against the defending of USAID, which I'll echo some people before me, that is super appreciated. We frankly need you and other Republicans to do more. You've been a senator for 25 years now, and as your constituent for all of those years, I ask that you use that tenure and that clout on something we desperately need. Someone from the right to stand up to this administration when they act outside the bounds of the Constitution. So what I'm really asking is that you remember and abide by the oath you took when you were sworn in as a senator, which was, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That's all I have. Thank you.
I just want to say, I cannot believe we are here begging our senator to do what is his job and what is his duty to us. It's ridiculous. It's unacceptable. Okay, there you go. I'm Jolene Grable. I'm a Topeka resident for 33 years. I'm ready to enjoy the freedom of my retirement years, but with social and Medicare threatened, it no longer feels like the land of the free to me. All of a sudden, there's a coup underway at the highest levels of our government, with both chambers of Congress and the Supreme Court already in the pocket of the new president. His ability to stay within the boundaries of our Constitution and still impose his agenda on the American people seemed unlimited. But that would require him to play by the rules of our democracy. He enjoys unprecedented political power, and yet for him it is not enough. This president wants more authority, and he wants it faster than due process and democracy will allow. He seems in search of a kingdom to rule filled with only loyal subjects who don't dare disobey his commands. To that end, he has unleashed a band of unelected tech industry thugs with virtually no government intelligence or practical understanding. One of the best descriptions of what's happening that I've seen came from a Trump voter and a former veteran who was hired in 2014 by the Ag Department's Natural Resources Conservation Service, and he was fired last Friday, the 14th. His statement was this: "There is no civility, no honor, no courage, no consideration for the citizen employee." I think that's pretty impactful coming from a Trump voter. Senator, you must be experiencing these truths firsthand, and I simply don't understand how you can sit by without raising objection. Last week, the White House was talking about radical transparency, which is such a joke because we all know nothing he's doing is transparent. Nothing. In fact, has the White House provided Congress with a detailed inventory of the cuts underway? Have they even provided you, Senator, with an inventory of budget cuts and workforce reductions that impact Kansas? Or are you and your staff relegated to reading executive orders and trying to deduce what they mean for Kansas, just like the rest of us? Senator, I'm grateful to you for what you did on Food for Peace, but so much more is at stake, and we need your voice on all of it. Today, I'm asking you to give your oath of office meaning. Speak up, please, for what you know is just and right. Please do the honorable thing. Kansans will be watching.
Thank you so much for your powerful comments and speak right to our hearts. I think I'm seeing in the comments many people saying, hear, hear. Yes, exactly. You're echoing many of what your fellow Kansans are feeling in our hearts. So thank you for that. We appreciate that. We'd like to move on to Dot next. If you'd be willing to unmute your microphone, Dot, and jump in here.
Unmuted. I'm ready.
All right, I'll mute up so you can go. Thanks, Dot.
Okay. Good afternoon, Senator Moran and everyone. My name is Dot Neri, and I live in Lawrence. I speak as a retired research professor, a wheelchair user with a disability from birth, and an older adult with severe mobility and other health issues. I speak from my bed in my own home and my own community right now. I'm focusing my remarks on the proposed cuts to programs and services under the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. First, you may know that the Administration on Community Living under HHS supports people of all ages with disabilities to live where they choose, with the people they choose, and with the ability to participate fully in their communities, which is considered basic quality of life. This includes your neighbor who is aging at home, your cousin with an intellectual and developmental disability who bags your groceries at the local grocery store, your colleague who is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and still works, and you, if you were to sustain a life-altering brain injury or spinal cord injury in a vehicular crash. No one, I repeat, no one wants to live in an institution. The ACL funds critical research and programs that support people with disabilities to live in the community and to reach their highest potential, which can include working and paying taxes. It helps create accessible communities and removes barriers through a nationwide network of independent living centers and Americans with Disabilities Act resource centers so that everyone can participate in and contribute to their communities. Funding cuts to this agency will directly impact the lives of millions of Americans with disabilities. I was invited to the signing ceremony for the ADA on the White House lawn in 1990. It was a great step forward for the disability community. But while the ADA guarantees us rights, the ACL helps to create ongoing change so that we can exercise those rights. Second, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are vital programs in the lives of Americans with disabilities of all ages, children to older adults. Senator Moran, as my elected representative, I am relying on you. Will you vote against efforts to cut funding for these HHS programs, both through the Department of Governmental Efficiency and in upcoming budget negotiations? Your constituents expect you to advocate for programs that allow us to live full lives in our communities. I've contacted you frequently over the last month on these issues, but never received a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Dot. Really appreciate you adding your voice to the mix here. Very important and relevant concerns about Medicaid and Medicare and all the other social programs that are being hit with a meat cleaver. So next, we're going to go to something that Mary has written, but Mary asked if Laura would read it for her. So we'll go to Laura to do the reading, right, Laura?
That's exactly right. Mary S. has asked me, she lives in Northeast Kansas, and Mary S. sent in these questions that she had for Senator Moran and asked if I would read them for her, and I said that I would. She said she had a question about Medicaid, right to the point of what we were just discussing in the aid that's being cut in various ways. 79 million people are enrolled in Medicaid and the CHIP program. The Budget Committee voted to seek at least $880 billion in mandatory cuts. Medicaid is expected to bear most of that cost. At stake are the financial health of thousands of hospitals and community centers and a huge source of revenue and a huge revenue source to all states. 1 in 4 births, 60% of nursing home costs are paid by Medicare. This cut will affect our most vulnerable citizens. Kansas has experienced the closing of many rural hospitals. As a mental health care professional who has seen many clients who utilize Medicaid, what will occur when they have no access to therapy or medications? 62 hospitals in Kansas are at risk for closing. How will these communities be supported? What is the cost benefit to cutting these services? We, the people, want to live in freedom, not fear. Please represent us appropriately, Senator Moran. That's from Mary S. in Northeast Kansas.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today. My name is Senator Moran. My name is Owen Tom Pryor. I'm from Columbus, Kansas. And the question I have for you, when will you stand up for the people of Kansas? I ask, why have Republicans consistently failed to pay down our national debt? You and I had a conversation about this a few years ago when I reminded you that when Bill Clinton left office, he left us with an $800 billion surplus. And you agreed that should have been used to pay down the debt instead of giving it as a tax cut to most Americans, but most of it went to the wealthiest. My grandchildren will be given the awful debt accumulated by this administration and Republicans who now want to cut government without any thought to what will save money. Defense spending has often been singled out as a way to cut expenses. I am a combat Vietnam veteran. I served with the United States Navy from 1965 to 1969. I was a hospital corpsman and spent a good deal of time with the India Company, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marines. But yet budgets were not cut, but now for the Defense Department. But now we've put people in charge of the Defense Department who are supporting taking an axe to everything that moves. This approach will result in large expenses. Why have you not stood up to this administration and his leadership? The people of Kansas expect you to represent us and just say no to him. I ask you, Senator Moran, with a great deal of respect, the time will come when you will have to stand up for us. Now is that time. Thank you, Senator Moran, and thank you everyone here for the outstanding statements that have been made. God bless all of you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. And thank you for your service as well. I'm glad you contributed to this. And I think at this point, we've only got one more person, one more speaker that I know of. I saw Diane enter the waiting room a few minutes ago. So Diane, we had you on the list earlier, but you're here now. So if you are ready to go ahead and unmute and we'll go to you. Diane K.
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Diane Kennedy. I've lived in Roland Park, Kansas, my whole entire adult life. I'm retired after 42 years with Children's Mercy, working as a pediatric nurse, and then a clinical researcher and faculty with the University of Kansas. I have a few short statements, a question. Under what legal authority can Elon Musk dismantle government entities created by Congress, fire thousands of government employees without process, withhold funds that have been appropriated by Congress, and access the personal data of Americans, especially in light of Elon's massive conflicts of interest? We feel we are living in an unsafe society that has been deliberately created by a corrupt and cruel billionaire and president. Abandoning healthcare research about infectious disease, cancer, vaccines, and neurological disorders is literally obscene. Americans will be hurt. We need the foundational services that our government provides, not huge tax cuts for billionaires. A president must abide by the Constitution. This power grab is terrifying and will affect all Americans, including Republicans. Also, we must support NATO and Ukraine. Ukraine did not start the war with Russia. How absurd. Occupying Gaza with intentions of building a Mideastern Riviera is violating international law. Foreign policy is absurd and shameful. We need our allies. Please, I beg of you, everyone in Congress must speak up to this very corrupt and evil president. Thank you. I would love to hear from you. I email you on a regular basis.
We moved right along and covered a lot of territory. We've got a lot of testimonials here, and we appreciate you all taking time to join us today and say your piece. And we will be putting this together. I plan to do some editing, minimal editing on the whole thing so that the whole thing is available, just to kind of clean it up a little bit, although I don't know that I need to do a whole lot. And I also will be probably compiling an edited highlight reel kind of some of the more pithy remarks that will be shorter, and perhaps some people will take the time to watch that if they don't want to take the time for the whole thing. And we do have a script available. Somebody asked me about the script, so if everybody's okay to share that, it's another document we might be able to make available. So we will do that, get it together, and we will provide the information to Senator Moran's office, and hopefully someone will get back to us about this, and preferably the senator will do his own video to respond to us and maybe share that somehow. In any event, we really appreciate you all taking your time to share, and it's a difficult time for this country and for the entire world. And I think it's important that people get involved. And I think we, the people, can have an impact on this process at this point, primarily by putting some pressure to encourage our Congress to represent us and make this more of a co-equal branch of government to get things restored, the balance restored. So Laura, what else do we need to say before we shut down?
I love what you just said, Dave, about Senator Moran responding by video. I just like to make that within this one document, a formal request. Senator Moran, your constituents have poured our hearts out respectfully, earnestly, strongly about our concerns, our worries, the implications of what's going on. And we would like to hear from you. Please respond to us. And I think Dave's idea is a great one. If you don't have the ability to do a live town hall for whatever reason, can you respond to us in a recording that then we can share with all of these people that took the time and effort to spend their entire sunny day, Saturday, sitting in this meeting to give our remarks to you? Could you please respond to us? We would ask you most earnestly. And I would say, in echoing respectfully what everyone said here, I do think that's part of your job. I do. So we would request that respectfully. Please, if you could respond to us, we would really appreciate hearing your thoughts on this.